What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actresses walks into what should be a friendly morning chat show, only to find herself facing a host determined to tear her down on live television? In just 41 seconds of one particular exchange, Lorraine Kelly's smug demeanor would crumble as Kate Winslet delivered a response so devastating, so perfectly timed, that it would leave the entire studio in stunned silence. The morning started like any other on the show: bright lights, cheerful music, and the promise of light entertainment for viewers across the country. Kate Winslet had arrived at the studio early, prepared to discuss her latest film project, a passion piece she had spent years bringing to life. She sat in the makeup chair, going over talking points with her publicist, expecting nothing more than the usual softball questions about her career and personal life. But the moment she walked onto that set, something felt different. The energy was off. Lorraine Kelly sat in her chair with a look that wasn't quite welcoming, wasn't quite warm. It was the look of someone who had decided, before the cameras even started rolling, that this interview was going to go a very different direction than anyone had planned. The show's panel that morning included Marcus, the entertainment correspondent who usually kept things light and breezy, and Jennifer, a journalist known for asking pointed questions, but typically with a sense of fairness. They sat on either side of the main interview area, ready to chime in as the segment progressed. The camera started rolling. Lorraine Kelly opened with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, welcome Kate Winslet, everyone," Lorraine said, her voice carrying an edge that experienced viewers might have caught immediately. "So lovely of you to grace us with your presence this morning. I know how busy you important Hollywood types are." Kate shifted slightly in her seat, maintaining her composure. She had done hundreds of interviews. She knew how to handle a host with an attitude. "Thank you for having me, Lorraine. I'm really excited to talk about the film." "Oh yes, the film," Lorraine said, leaning back in her chair with an exaggerated casual air. "Another one of those serious, dramatic pieces you're so fond of. Tell me, do you ever just have fun anymore? Or is everything always so intensely meaningful with you?" The question landed like a slap. Marcus and Jennifer exchanged glances. This wasn't the tone they'd expected. This wasn't how these interviews typically went. Kate took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "I think there's great value in telling stories that matter, stories that explore the human condition. But I've done plenty of lighter work, too. I just choose projects that speak to me." "That speak to you?" Lorraine repeated, her voice dripping with mockery. "How very noble. Must be nice to be able to pick and choose like that while the rest of us have to work for a living." Kate's eyes narrowed slightly. "I do work for a living, Lorraine. Acting is my profession. I take it very seriously." "Oh, we know you take it seriously," Lorraine shot back. "Perhaps a bit too seriously, if I'm being honest. I mean, come on, every interview I read with you, it's all about the craft, the method, the deep emotional journey. Do you ever just clock in, do the job, and go home? Or does everything have to be this grand artistic statement?" Jennifer, looking uncomfortable, tried to interject. "Lorraine, I think what Kate brings to her roles is actually quite—" "I wasn't asking you, Jennifer," Lorraine snapped, not even looking at her fellow panelist. Her eyes stayed locked on Kate. "I'm asking our guest here why she always seems to think she's better than everyone else in the industry." Kate straightened in her seat, her composure beginning to crack. "I have never said or implied that I'm better than anyone. I have the utmost respect for my colleagues and everyone who works in film. And yet," Lorraine continued, leaning forward now, "you're always the one giving quotes about how important it is to transform, to disappear into a role, to do things the real way, the authentic way. It comes across as rather judgmental, don't you think? Like you're looking down on actors who might approach things differently." "That's not my intention at all," Kate said, her voice firm but controlled. "I'm simply talking about my own process. I would never presume to tell another actor how they should work." Lorraine laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Oh, please. You don't have to say it directly. It's in every interview, every press conference. Kate Winslet, the serious actress. Kate Winslet, who does her own stunts. Kate Winslet, who refused to let them digitally alter her appearance. We get it. You're very principled, very admirable, very exhausting, quite frankly." Marcus jumped in, clearly trying to defuse the situation. "I think what's actually remarkable about Kate's career is the range." "Marcus, darling, I'm conducting this interview," Lorraine said, her tone condescending. If I wanted your input, I would have asked for it. Kate's jaw tightened. She had been patient. She had been professional. But there was only so much a person could take. Lorraine, I came here in good faith to talk about a project I care deeply about. If you're not interested in having that conversation, perhaps we should just end this now. Oh, how convenient, Lorraine said, her voice rising. The moment someone asks you a challenging question, asks you to perhaps examine how you come across to people, you want to run away. Is that how you handle criticism, Kate? Because from where I'm sitting, you seem to dish it out quite freely, but can't handle receiving it. I haven't dished out anything, Kate replied, her voice steady but her eyes flashing. You're the one who has been attacking me from the moment I sat down. You've insulted my work, my choices, my integrity, and you've done it all under the guise of asking questions. This isn't journalism, Lorraine. This is something else entirely. Lorraine's face flushed. Excuse me? Are you questioning my professionalism? I've been doing this for decades. I don't need some actress telling me how to do my job. And I don't need some talk show host projecting her own insecurities onto me on live television, Kate fired back. Whatever issue you have with me, it's clearly personal, and it has nothing to do with my film or my career. The studio fell silent. Jennifer's mouth hung open slightly. Marcus looked down at his notes, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. The crew members stood frozen, unsure whether to keep filming or cut to commercial. Lorraine's face went from flush to crimson. How dare you? How absolutely dare you come onto my show and speak to me that way? You think because you've won some awards and been in some successful films that you can sit there and insult me? I'm responding to your insults, Lorraine, Kate said, her voice calm now, almost eerily so. You've spent the last several minutes attempting to belittle me and my work. I've shown you nothing but respect, and you've returned it with contempt. I'm simply pointing out what's happening here. What's happening here, Lorraine said, standing up from her chair, is that you're showing your true colors. All that polish, all that grace you show on the red carpet, it's all an act, isn't it? You're just as arrogant and difficult as they say you are. Kate stood as well, maintaining her dignity even as the situation spiraled. Who says that, Lorraine? Because I've worked with hundreds of people over my career, and I've maintained good relationships with nearly all of them. So where exactly are you getting your information? I have my sources, Lorraine said vaguely, waving her hand dismissively. People talk. They say you're demanding on set, that you have to have everything your way, that you make everyone's lives difficult with your perfectionism. That's absolutely untrue, Kate said, her voice rising slightly for the first time. I am collaborative. I am respectful. I work hard, yes, but I would never make someone's job more difficult deliberately. If you're going to make accusations like that, you need to back them up with facts, not vague insinuations. Jennifer, sensing an opportunity, spoke up again. I actually interviewed several of Kate's recent co-stars and crew members for a piece I did last year, and everyone had nothing but positive things to say about working with her. Lorraine whipped her head toward Jennifer. Well, of course they did. They're not going to badmouth her to a journalist, are they? They want to work in this industry again. So, let me get this straight, Kate said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. If people say nice things about me, they're lying to protect their careers. But your unnamed sources, who apparently say negative things, they're telling the truth. Do you hear how absurd that sounds? What's absurd, Lorraine countered, is you standing here acting like you're above criticism. Newsflash, Kate, you're not special. You're not exempt from being questioned about your behavior and your attitude just because you're famous. I'm not asking to be exempt from anything, Kate said, her patience clearly wearing thin. I'm asking to be treated with basic human decency, something you seem incapable of providing. You invited me here under the pretense of promoting my film, and instead you've used this platform to launch personal attacks. That's not professional. That's not journalism. That's just cruel. Marcus, gathering courage, tried once more to intervene. Perhaps we could take a quick break and... We're not taking a break, Lorraine snapped. We're going to finish this conversation. I want to know why Kate thinks she's too good to answer. Honest questions about her reputation in the industry. They're not honest questions, Kate said, her voice firm and clear. They're accusations dressed up as questions. There's a difference, and the fact that you can't see that is deeply troubling. Lorraine crossed her arms, a smirk playing at her lips. You know what I think? I think you've spent so long being praised and celebrated that you've forgotten what it's like to face any kind of pushback. Everyone's always telling you how wonderful you are, how talented you are, and the moment someone suggests you might not be perfect, you fall apart. I'm not falling apart, Kate said quietly, but with unmistakable strength. I'm standing here, facing your hostility with grace, trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism, even though you abandoned yours the moment I walked onto this set. Oh, please, Lorraine said, rolling her eyes. The victim act doesn't suit you, Kate. You're a wealthy, successful actress. You don't get to play the victim. I'm not playing anything, Kate replied. I'm simply stating facts. You've been hostile, dismissive, and insulting. Those are objective observations, not victimhood. Lorraine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a more dangerous tone. Let me tell you something about the real world, Kate. In the real world, people don't have the luxury of choosing only meaningful projects. They don't get to pontificate about their process and their craft. They have to take what work they can get and be grateful for it. So forgive me if I don't have much sympathy for your artistic struggles. I never asked for your sympathy, Kate said. I never claimed my struggles were worse than anyone else's. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. And it doesn't mean I don't have the right to talk about my work in the way that feels authentic to me. Authentic, Lorraine repeated with a sneer. There's that word again. You're all about authenticity, aren't you? Except when it comes to admitting that maybe, just maybe, you're a bit full of yourself. Kate took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was measured, calm, but absolutely devastating. You know what I think, Lorraine? I think you're angry because you've spent your career doing exactly what you just described. Taking whatever work comes your way, being grateful just to have a platform, never quite reaching the level of respect or recognition you feel you deserve. And instead of examining why that might be, instead of looking at your own choices and your own behavior, you've decided to take it out on people like me. People who have worked hard, made sacrifices, and yes, achieved success. You're not interviewing me, Lorraine. You're punishing me for having the career you wish you had. The silence that followed was deafening. Lorraine's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, fury, hurt, and finally, a kind of cold rage. Jennifer looked down at her lap. Marcus stared straight ahead, not daring to move. Lorraine's voice, when she finally spoke, was shaking. Get out. Kate didn't move. Excuse me? I said get out. Lorraine repeated, louder now. Get out of my studio. Get off my show. I don't have to stand here and be psychoanalyzed by some self-important actress who thinks she knows everything. I'm not the one who made this personal, Lorraine, Kate said quietly. You did that all on your own. Out, Lorraine shouted, pointing toward the exit. Now! Kate stood there for a moment, looking at Lorraine with something that might have been pity. Then she turned to Jennifer and Marcus. I'm sorry you had to witness this. You both seem like lovely people, and I hope you find yourselves in better working environments in the future. She turned back to Lorraine one last time. I came here to talk about a film that explores themes of resilience, dignity, and grace under pressure. I suppose I got to demonstrate those qualities in a way I never expected. Thank you for the opportunity, I suppose. With that, Kate Winslet gathered her things and walked toward the exit with her head held high. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of Lorraine Kelly's face as she watched her guests leave. Her expression a mixture of defiance and something that looked suspiciously like panic as she realized what had just happened on live television. Jennifer finally broke the silence. Lorraine, what just? Don't, Lorraine said sharply, holding up a hand. Just don't. Marcus cleared his throat. Should we go to commercial? Lorraine didn't answer. She stood there, frozen, as the weight of the entire exchange seemed to settle on her shoulders. The crew members exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. The producer's voice came through someone's earpiece, frantic instructions being given, but it was too late to undo what had been done. Kate Winslet walked out of that studio with her dignity intact, her professionalism, unquestioned by anyone who had witnessed what really happened. She had come prepared to promote her work, to share her passion for her craft, and instead found herself having to defend her character against baseless accusations and personal attacks. But she had done so with grace, with clarity, and with a final observation so precise and so true that it had cut through all of Lorraine Kelly's bluster and bravado, leaving the host exposed and unable to respond with anything other than anger and dismissal. The interview that was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance had turned into something else entirely, A moment where one woman's insecurity and resentment had collided with another woman's refusal to accept unfair treatment. A moment where professionalism met pettiness and dignity won out over spite. As Kate left the building and got into her car, she took a moment to compose herself. Her publicist was already on the phone, doing damage control, but Kate wasn't worried. She knew the truth of what had happened. Anyone who watched the full interview would see exactly who had been reasonable and who had been out of line. Back in the studio, Lorraine Kelly was left to face the consequences of her own behavior. The show eventually went to commercial, but the damage was done. She had invited a respected actress onto her program and had spent the entire time attacking her, only to have her own motivations and insecurities called out in the most articulate and devastating way possible. Jennifer leaned over to Marcus as they waited for the commercial break to end. "I've never seen anything like that in all my years in television." Marcus nodded slowly. "Neither have I. And something tells me we're going to be talking about this for a very long time." They were right. The interview would be dissected and analyzed. Clips would be shared and reshared, and people would debate exactly what had happened and why. But anyone who watched it in full, anyone who saw the entire exchange from beginning to end, would come away with a clear understanding of who had been the aggressor and who had simply been defending themselves. Kate Winslet had walked into that studio as a guest, treating the opportunity with respect and professionalism. She had been met with hostility and had responded with patience and grace for as long as humanly possible. And when she finally did push back, it wasn't with insults or theatrics. It was with truth, delivered calmly and clearly. Lorraine Kelly had started the interview with some kind of agenda, some need to take Kate down a peg, to challenge her, to make her look bad. But in trying to diminish someone else, she had only diminished herself. In trying to expose some perceived flaw in her guest, she had only exposed her own. The rest of the show limped along awkwardly. Lorraine tried to regain her composure, tried to act as though nothing unusual had happened, but everyone could see through it. The energy was gone. The confidence was shaken. She had lost control of her own show. And worse, she had lost the moral high ground she had tried to claim. Jennifer and Marcus did their best to salvage the remaining segments, but their hearts weren't in it. They had just witnessed their host cross a line that shouldn't have been crossed, and they had been powerless to stop it. They had tried to intervene, tried to redirect, but Lorraine had been determined to pursue her attack, and she had paid the price for that determination. As the show finally ended and the camera stopped rolling, the studio cleared out quickly. People avoided eye contact with Lorraine, unsure of what to say or how to act. The producers would have meetings, statements would be prepared, but none of that would change what had happened in those crucial minutes when Kate Winslet had finally had enough and delivered a response that left Lorraine Kelly speechless and exposed. Kate, meanwhile, went on with her day. She did other interviews, attended other events, promoted her film with the same passion and professionalism she always brought to her work. She didn't dwell on what had happened, didn't seek revenge or retribution. She had said what needed to be said, had stood up for herself when it mattered, and had moved on. That was the difference, really. Kate Winslet had nothing to prove and nothing to hide. She knew who she was, knew the value of her work, and knew that the respect of her peers and collaborators was worth more than the approval of one hostile talk show host. Lorraine Kelly, on the other hand, was left to reckon with what her behavior had revealed about her. About her resentments, her insecurities, her willingness to use her platform not to elevate or inform or entertain, but to tear someone down for reasons that had nothing to do with legitimate journalism or critique. The interview had started with Lorraine in control, or so she thought. She had the home field advantage, the support of her network, the power that comes with being the host and asking the questions. But she had misunderstood something fundamental. That power comes with responsibility, and when you abuse it, when you use it to attack rather than to illuminate, you lose it. Kate had taken that power back, not through volume or aggression, but through clarity and truth. She had held up a mirror to Lorraine's behavior and forced her to see what she was really doing. And when that mirror revealed something ugly, something petty and mean-spirited, Lorraine had no choice but to end the interview because she couldn't face the reflection. The cameras had captured everything, the hostility, the attacks, the deflections, and finally, the moment when Kate's patience ran out and she delivered an assessment so accurate, so perfectly phrased, that it left no room for argument or denial. 41 seconds of pure, devastating truth that changed the entire dynamic of the interview and left the host scrambling to regain control she would never fully recover. That was the moment everyone would remember. Not the beginning of the interview with its false pleasantries, not the middle section with its increasingly pointed questions, but that final exchange, when Kate Winslet looked at Lorraine Kelly and told her exactly what was really happening, stripping away all the pretense and exposing the real motivation behind the hostility. It was uncomfortable to watch. It was awkward and tense and filled with the kind of genuine emotion that usually gets edited out of television. But it was also real. It was honest. It was a moment of truth in an industry often built on polite fictions and careful management of image and message. Kate had shattered that careful management, not out of malice or a desire for drama, but out of self-respect. She had drawn a line and said, essentially, this far and no further. You can question my work, you can challenge my choices, but you cannot attack my character based on nothing, and you cannot expect me to sit here and accept it with a smile. That refusal to accept unfair treatment, that willingness to stand up for herself even when it would have been easier to just get through the interview and leave quietly, that was what made the moment so powerful. Kate Winslet didn't need Lorraine Kelly's show. She didn't need the exposure or the platform. She had come as a courtesy, as part of promoting a project she cared about. But she also didn't need to subject herself to abuse, and she had made that clear in the most definitive way possible. By speaking truth to power, by refusing to play along with Lorraine's game, she had shifted the entire narrative. She had gone from being the guest being interviewed to being the person with the moral authority, the one who saw the situation clearly and articulated it perfectly. And Lorraine, who had started the interview feeling in control, feeling like she was going to get Kate to reveal something or admit something or stumble somehow, was left with no choice but to eject her guest from the show. Because once Kate had said what she said, once she had identified exactly what was happening and why, there was no coming back from it. There was no witty retort, no clever deflection that could undo that moment of clarity. So she had done the only thing she could do, end the interview, remove Kate from the studio, and try to move on as though nothing significant had happened. But everyone knew better. Everyone who had been in that studio, everyone who would watch the footage later, would know exactly what had transpired. They would see who had been reasonable and who had been irrational, who had been fair and who had been unfair, who had maintained their dignity and who had lost theirs. The cameras captured Kate's final moments in the studio, her posture straight, her expression calm but firm, her movements deliberate and controlled. She didn't storm out, she didn't slam doors or make dramatic gestures. She simply collected herself, said her piece, and left with the same grace she had entered with. Behind her, Lorraine stood rigid, her face a mask of barely controlled emotion. The smugness that had characterized the beginning of the interview was gone, replaced by something harder to read. Embarrassment, perhaps, or anger at having her true motivations exposed so clearly. Or maybe just the dawning realization that she had miscalculated badly. Marcus and Jennifer sat in their chairs, witnesses to something they would likely never forget. In their years of working in television, they had seen plenty of awkward moments, plenty of interviews that went off the rails. But this was different. This wasn't a technical mishap or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate confrontation that had backfired spectacularly on the person who initiated it. As the commercial break continued, the studio buzzed with nervous energy. Production assistants whispered to each other. Camera operators shook their heads. The makeup artist who had prepared Kate earlier looked stricken, as if somehow she should have known, should have warned someone that this was going to happen. But how could anyone have known? Kate Winslet had arrived professional and prepared. She had been friendly to the staff, gracious in the green room, ready to do her job. The hostility had come from one source and one source only, Lorraine Kelly, who had decided, for reasons known only to her, that this interview would be different. Maybe she had read something that rubbed her the wrong way. Maybe she had formed an opinion based on other interviews or articles. Maybe she was having a bad day and Kate just happened to be there. Whatever the reason, she had approached the interview with an agenda, and that agenda had been to take Kate down. But Kate Winslet was not someone who could be taken down easily. She had survived decades in an industry known for chewing people up and spitting them out. She had faced criticism, rejection, and personal struggles. She had built a career not just on talent, but on resilience, on the ability to face challenges head-on and come out stronger. So when Lorraine had tried to rattle her, tried to make her defensive or flustered, Kate had responded with the same qualities that had made her successful: intelligence, composure, and an unwillingness to accept false narratives. She had seen what was happening, understood the game being played, and had refused to participate. Instead, she had called it out, not with anger or emotion, but with clear-eyed observation. She had said, essentially, "I see what you're doing, I understand why you're doing it, and I'm not going to let it continue." And in doing so, she had completely shifted the power dynamic. Lorraine had wanted to be the one in control, asking the tough questions, pushing the boundaries, getting reactions. But Kate had turned it around, making Lorraine the subject of scrutiny, examining her motivations, her behavior, her professional ethics. And under that examination, Lorraine had crumbled. She couldn't defend her approach because it was indefensible. She couldn't justify her questions because they weren't based on anything substantial. She couldn't maintain her position of authority because Kate had exposed the foundation it was built on: insecurity, resentment, and a misuse of the platform she had been given. So she had ended it. Not because Kate had been unprofessional, but because Kate had been too professional, too clear-sighted, too articulate in pointing out exactly what was wrong with the entire interaction. Lorraine couldn't win the argument on merit, so she had used the only power she had left, the ability to tell Kate to leave. But even that had backfired, because in kicking Kate off the show, Lorraine had essentially admitted defeat. She had shown that she couldn't handle the truth Kate had spoken, couldn't face the mirror that had been held up to her behavior. She had proven Kate's point more effectively than Kate ever could have on her own. The rest of the show would go on. Other segments would air. Lorraine would smile and laugh and try to act as though everything was normal. But the staff knew, the panelists knew, and soon, when the footage made its way into the world, everyone would know. They would see a host who had abused her position, who had used her platform to attack rather than to inform. They would see a guest who had maintained her dignity in the face of that attack, who had responded with intelligence and grace. And they would draw their own conclusions about who had been in the right. Kate Winslet's car pulled away from the studio, carrying her to her next obligation. She would honor her commitments, do her job, promote her film. This interview would become a footnote, a strange moment in an otherwise successful press tour. She wouldn't let it define her or derail her. But for Lorraine Kelly, the impact would be more lasting. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was a revelation of character, a moment where her professional mask had slipped and revealed something ugly underneath. It would be talked about, analyzed, remembered. And every time someone thought of her show, they might think of this: the day she let her personal feelings override her professional responsibility and paid the price for it in the most public way possible.